Hi everyone, Leah here at EurekaCrystalBeads.com with another fun beading video for you. Before I get started, take a look at our channel, and if you like what you see, hit that subscribe button and notification bell, and you'll always know when we're posting new content. Today's project is an earring design I'm calling the Anastasia earring, and it features a couple of fun things. So first of all, we have some Swarovski elements here. We have a rivoli in the center. This is a 12mm rivoli. And we're also featuring some 3mm bicones around the edges. And extra exciting, this is the newest Swarovski color called Iris, which if you haven't seen it is beautiful. It is like an exact in-between of amethyst and light amethyst. So if you've ever thought that, oh, amethyst is a little too dark and light amethyst is a little too light, then Iris is your color. So we have that now on the website, EurekaCrystalBeads.com. And in addition to that, I have some delicas in there. Size 11 delicas. I have some Miyuki 15s, and what I think is the star of the show are these Czech Charlottes. These are size 15 Charlottes, those teeny tiny little copper beads. You can see them all in between the crystals here. You can see them in some little picots around the face of the rivoli. You can see we've pulled them into the very back there. And they're so stunning. What makes them extra special is they're literally the smallest bead made that you can buy out on the market. And they're not just a teeny tiny bead, they are a teeny tiny bead with a single facet on them. So that makes them a little extra special, a little extra sparkly. And they're really wonderful for pulling in beadwork when you want to go in just that little extra bit over your stone, or if you want to just do some really stunning detailed work, the size 15 Charlottes are phenomenal. Now, another thing to note about them, let me show you guys the little vial here. Another thing to note about them is that they are smaller than a regular size 15. So if you're thinking that a size 15 Charlotte, if you're thinking that the only difference is that little facet, that would be incorrect. So these are even smaller than maybe a Toho or Miyuki 15 that you're used to. These are even smaller. And you can see that when you look around the front there. So the beads right around the very front of the rivoli, those little copper ones, those are the Charlottes. And then right next to them are some Miyuki 15s. And you can see that they are considerably bigger. So that's what these are great for when you really want to pull in that beadwork extra tight. And Eureka Crystal Beads just started carrying a whole huge selection of these 15 Charlottes. And at least in my beading journeys, 15 Charlottes are not easy to find. So now we are a great destination for those Charlottes. We have so many absolutely stunning colors, metallics, metallic ABs, some colored ones. Oh, they're beautiful. And in this vial, you end up getting about 3,400 of them. So one little vial here will carry you through so many projects. And I really love having these around in my beader stash just because they do add those nice little finishing touches to any kind of beading project. So I'm a huge fan of them. So that's what I'm featuring here today in my Anastasia earring. So let me show you a little bit more up close all of the other players that we have here. So like I said before, we have our 12mm rivoli. This one is in light gray Delight. I have the other half of my ear wire here. This is a nice antique copper colored ear wire. And I have my 3mm Swarovski bicones in Iris. You will need a total of 30 to make the entire pair, 15 per side. I have these really beautiful copper colored size 11 Delica beads. These are a cylinder bead, Miyuki's cylinder bead. I have a size 15 seed bead, a regular size 15 seed bead. However, I do want to note that for this project, I am using a Miyuki 15, and I do think that is important here. If you're not aware, Miyuki and Toho, there is a hair of a difference between them. So I think myself and many others find that Miyukis are a hair smaller than Tohos. So in this case, we're using these to pull in a bezel that's already pretty small. So it's pretty crucial, I think, in this case to use a Miyuki 15. And I have a size 11 seed bead. Now, in this case, this one is Toho. I went for color versus brand because you can use either Toho or Miyuki in this project. It doesn't matter. Either one is fine. So I went with the one that had the perfect color I was looking for, which in this case was a Toho. And now you can see those teeny tiny 15s. So let me bring up those 11s again, just so you can see the difference in size. So if you have an idea in your, or you have in your own bead stash what the 11s look like, you can see how teeny tiny these little 15 Charlottes are. And hopefully you can see, I don't know, a lot of them are sitting flat, so you can't see the sides where that facet is, but hopefully when you're working with them, or as I'm working on the project here, you'll see those beautiful little glints of light from those facets. So I'm also going to be working with 6-pound fire line. In this case, I'm going to be using smoke. You could probably get away with the crystal. I think either color would look just fine with this earring, but I am using smoke here. I did think it was the better of the two options for this particular color scheme, and you'll also see it a little bit better on the camera with the white background. But if you have crystal, I think crystal would be fine too. Now, something else very important to note, I'm using a size 12 needle. This is very important with these little Charlottes because you're not going to be able to get away with using a size 10 needle. Maybe not even a size 11 needle, because these are so teeny tiny with very tiny holes. So you're going to want to go with a size 12 needle if you want to have the easiest time making this project. And then lastly, I just have my little snippers here, and I have a pair of chain nose pliers that will assist in adding my ear wire once my earring is all done. All right, so let me finish cleaning up the rest of these little runaway Charlottes, and we will get started. Okay, so my 6-pound fire line, the length I'm using here is about 3/4 of a wingspan. So basically I outstretched one of my arms and then I pulled fire line all the way to my opposite shoulder, and that's about how much fire line this takes. Now I'm going to start with my delicas here, and the delicas are going to create the first ring of seed beads that are going to start to capture my rivoli into place. So for a 12mm rivoli and a size 11 delica bead, we're going to be using 30 of these little beads here for that initial ring. And I like picking them up 5 at a time. I find that's an easier way for me to eyeball me getting the right amount on there. Of course, I will double check that before I get going with my actual bezel, because what we're doing here is even count tubular peyote. And it's important that we do start with an even number of beads. If you're off by even one and you suddenly have an odd number of beads, that will throw off your beadwork and you won't be able to do the rivoli or do the bezel around the rivoli. You can make projects with odd count tubular peyote, but they are not best for a bezel because there will never be a complete finish to the rows you're working on. So let me just double check that I have my 30 here. 30, there we go. And I also move them over 5 at a time, and it's a really easy way to make sure that I'm counting correctly. So I'm going to leave a tail that's a few inches long. Leave a tail that's long enough that you can throw a needle on it later and weave it in. So if you have any experience beading, which if you're doing this project, I hope you have a little bit of experience, you'll know roughly how much you like to have there to weave in at the end. I usually just leave a couple of inches. Sometimes people want to leave a little bit more, like 6 inches or so. It's up to you. Now I'm going to take my tail and my working thread, and I'm going to tie them in a square knot. That's right over left and then left over right. And then I take this little knot here and I pull it down just like that. I get a little ring of beads. Now you want to make sure this ring isn't too tight, but you don't want to have anything wiggling or anything loose either. So what I like to do is after I pull this nice and tight, I like to just kind of roll it in my fingers a little bit, and I find that that makes sure everything is just loose enough to be perfect tension for my peyote. The last thing I'm going to do is travel through a few more beads, just whatever my needle kind of happens to pop through. This will just help to pull that little knot right into the beadwork, and it won't be any kind of an issue at all in the future as we work on our project. This is what we have so far. Simple. Remember that 30 bead count is really important, that even number, and 30 is the perfect number for a 12mm rivoli. So I'm going to start by beginning my peyote. I'm going to pick up a new delica here. I'm going to skip over the next delica and go through the one after that. So let me give you a nice good close-up. You can see I have the delica on my needle here. Oops, let me twist it around. So you can see where I'm coming out of. I skipped over the next delica and went into the one after that. Basically, what we're going to be doing is going into every other delica in our ring. And each time we do that, we will pick up one delica along the way. And the delica that I just picked up will sit next to the delica that I just skipped over. Pretty easy. So let's try that again. Pick up another new delica, skip over the next delica, and go into the one after that. So another way you could think of it is if you're coming out of delica A, you're skipping over delica B, and you're going into delica C. And the delica you picked up just now will sit right next to delica B, which is the one you skipped over. So you can see we're making little teeth here, little up beads, and we have little down beads. We're going to keep going around until we get back to the other side. So I'm going to do a few more here. And what I like to do is just kind of hold this all between my fingertips, and I just like to expose the little part of my beadwork that I'm working on. And keeping the rest pinched between my fingertips is what will help to keep my beadwork nice and tight. And the way that you're going to get nice tension on this is that after you stick your needle through that delica, give it a nice good tug, nothing crazy, a nice good tug in the direction that the hole is running in the bead that you're coming out of. So if the bead that I'm coming out of, that little delica, is kind of running this way, that's the direction I'm going to pull. I'm not going to pull away from it or out of it like that. I'm going to pull it in the same direction that that hole is running in that delica. That is sort of your trick to nice tension, is making sure that you're pulling correctly. And a lot of people I find have loose tension because they are naturally just pulling off to the side. And that's not going to get you nice tight tension if that's not the direction that your beads are running. So go in, I went straight in front of me and I gave it a tug. I didn't pull out to the side. Okay, so this is what we got so far. Now I'm going to keep going around, and I am going to come back to you in just a minute when I get to the other side so I can show you how we complete the row that we're working on and how we start the next row, which is called our step up. Okay, I've gone almost all the way around. And I have one more new delica on my needle here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the delica bead that I should be going through, but you're going to notice how it's going to be right before there's that first little pair that we created. So at that point, you have to wonder, well, where do I go now? So you're going to go through the bead that you know you're supposed to go through. Remember, it's delica C if you're coming out of delica A. And then we have to do our step up. Now, our step up is what completes the row that we're working on and sets us up to start the next row. Now, oftentimes our step up is right there on the outside, but, and in this case, that would be the very first bead we added as we started our peyote. But in this case, we're going to continue our peyote on the inside of this circle. So we're going to step up into the bead right next to the one that was the first one we added when we started our peyote. So basically that up bead, the one that's sticking up, but it's on the inside of our circle here. So let me give you a good little view. Okay, so now we are on the inside of our circle, and we're going to start using a smaller bead. We're going to start using our Mayuki 15. This is going to start to pull our beadwork inward. When you're doing peyote and you continue to use the same size when you're doing tubular peyote, you will form a tube or a cylinder. It'll go straight up and you'll start to build a wall. But when you step down into a smaller size bead, you pull the beadwork in. Just like if you were to start using a larger size bead, you flare the beadwork out. So in this case, we're pulling our beadwork in because this is what's going to be this little seat that our rivoli is going to sit in. Now, the peyote is even easier now because all we have to remember is we're going through the beads that are popped up. And then we have those little ditches. That's where our 15s are going to sit. So sometimes peyote is called stitch in the ditch. And that's what we're doing. So I'm just going to go through the next delica that's popped up. And I have a little 15 on my needle, you can see. And that little ditch that I just skipped over is exactly where my 15 is going to sit. So we're going to start to do that around our circle, and you're going to start to pull a little bit tighter, and that's what's going to really help this beadwork flare, or not flare, pull into the center and create that little seat. Let me give you a close-up now that I have a few of them in there. Just like that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is keep going around, and I'll come back in a second once I get to that step up again to show you what's next. Okay, so I've added in my last 15, and I've done my step up. So let me show you where that was. So right here was my last 15. Let me get you in focus there. Was my last 15. I went into the delicate as I should have, and then I stepped right up into the very first 15 that I added when I started this row. That's your step up. So now we're going to go around again, but we're going to get even smaller, and we're going to start to use those Charlottes. I'll show you what that looks like. Let me get a few of them in there. You'll probably find that you're going to flick a few of these across the room. They're so teeny tiny, they sometimes want to jump right onto your needle and then right off of your needle. I'm using beautiful copper colored Charlottes. You can see how they just pull right in beautifully. And actually you can kind of see, if you look at that third one I added right here, you can see a little bit of that sparkle. There we go, a little bit of that sparkle. These really are stunning. They add the most beautiful finished fine detail to a lot of intricate beadwork pieces like this. So at this point, I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing. I'm going to go all the way around with my Charlottes, and I'm going to do my step up, and I'll be back in a minute to show you what's next. All right, I have all of my 15 Charlottes in there. You can see there that beautiful little copper color all around that inside, and hopefully you can even see some of that beautiful little sparkle. So I just did my step up, which means that the last one that I did was this one. I went through the 15 and then through this Charlotte, which was the very first one that I added when I did this row, and that's what completes this row and sets us up to start the next one. Now we're done here as far as bringing this peyote inside. Right now what we're going to do is we're going to work our way to this outer edge here, and we want to be coming out of one of our popped up delicas. So I think that the best way to do that is to go through the next delica, the next bead heading diagonally up, which happens to be a delica, and then just turn right around, reverse your beadwork, and go through the next delica. There we go. Just like that. Now we're going to turn our beadwork, and we're going to do a row of peyote with delicas. So remember what I said before about how when you do multiple rows of beads in tubular peyote that are the same size, you start to build a wall, or you start to build a cylinder. But in this case, we're going to build just a little bit of that cylinder, which is going to be the wall that will be on the outside of the rivoli edge. So that's what we're going to start to do with our delicas here. And we're really going to start to pull just a little bit tighter. And that's what's going to really help this wall to stiffen up and start to form. And again, the peyote is nice and easy now because all we're doing is going through each popped up bead after picking up a new bead. So there's no real digging in that we have to do like we did in that first row where everything was just in the same line. Okay, let me get one more on there, and I'm going to show you how that wall has started to form. Okay, and I'm going to give it a little bit of a tug. You can see how that wall is starting to form upwards right here. And that's going to be where the edge of our rivoli is. And so now we've started to make that seat for that rivoli. So let's keep heading around. And I don't know about you, but peyote bezels, or even just any kind of bezel, I like to come up with a lot of interesting bezels that even aren't peyote in order to capture Swarovski rivolis and stones into place. They are my favorite to work with. I'm a bit of a beading traditionalist. I like a lot of the traditional materials like our delicas and our 15s and our undrilled stones here. Kind of what I started with. And I really love, though, the methodical process of a peyote bezel. I just think it's absolutely relaxing. I think a lot of people who are maybe knitters or crocheters who want to jump into beading would like peyote because it's very repetitive and mindless after a while. So now I'm going to do my step up. So I've made it all the way around. I've picked up my final delica. I'm going through two delicas at once. You can see the first of those delicas is the one that is my C delica, or my popped up delica. And then the next one above that is the very first one that I added this row. So again, that is our step up. And you can see how we have this little seat that we've created. And eventually we'll be putting our rivoli in there, and you can see how it's the perfect size for our little 12mm rivoli. I love this light gray light gray delight Swarovski. It's really, really stunning. It flashes a lot of beautiful colors. Okay, so now we're going to start to pull in our beadwork. We're going to do that first, just like we did on the back. We're going to do that first with our Miyuki 15s. Now, what we're going to do is after we get maybe a third of them into this row, that's when we're going to put in our rivoli. And we're going to start to pull even tighter to really pull our beadwork over the stone. And then our stone will be permanently set in once we pull this shut. At that point, the Charlottes do become more of an accent, a visual, an aesthetic, and not so much something that's keeping the stone in. These Miyuki 15s are what will be keeping the stone in. But the 15s are that beautiful little, the 15 Charlottes are that beautiful little finishing touch that really sets beadwork apart. So we have about a third, almost a half of those 15 Miyukis in there. I'm going to take my stone. My little thing is I always rub it against my beading surface just to take off any fingerprints. I think it just looks extra pretty. It's just always my thing that I do. We're going to get it sat right in there. Of course, as I put my thumb right over it, thus making a fingerprint. I'm going to pull nice and tight, these 15s, and you can see that they start to pull over the stone. And then once we go all the way around, that stone will be permanently held into place. And again, these are definitely a really nice one evening project, which is, I think, great, because I think a lot of us beaders tend to jump from project to project as we get excited for new things that we discover, and that sometimes doesn't always mean finishing the project that we were most recently working on. So it's nice to not have to add something to that beading to-do list of yours, because you can easily finish these in an evening. Once you get the hang of it, a couple hours, boom, you're done. So now I've picked up my Miyuki 15 here. I'm about to plug that last one in. I'm doing my step up, which again is going through the next popped up bead to lock this one down into place, but then also the next bead up, which was the first bead added in this row that I'm completing. That is my step up. So our beautiful stone is in there, just like it was in there on the back. Or rather, this was pulled in enough on the back before we added the Charlottes, but now we're going to add those Charlottes in as that extra little accent. And with the selection that you're going to find over on EurekaCrystalBeads.com, we have so many stunning ones that you're really going to be able to work with more than just your gold, silver, pewter, copper. We have some beautiful iridescent Charlottes. We have some amazing metallic with an AB finish on them. We actually have some Charlotte colors here that I've never seen before, that I didn't even know existed. And I am not new to this beading world, and I had not seen these particular colors before. So I think you guys are going to go nuts if you really like working with Charlottes. So let me show you how that pulled right in. Again, it's that extra little something something. And I love Charlottes because they're that bead that makes everyone look at them and go, how do you work with beads that tiny? And I love when people seem fascinated by the beadwork that I'm doing, where they have a hard time figuring out how it was done. All right, I'm going to finish going around the front here, and then I'll see you back in a minute to show you the next step. All right, I have finished my inner row of Charlottes there. I've done my step up. Now I'm going to go through the next two beads diagonally, which is going to be a Miyuki 15 and then a Delica. If you can get through both at once, that is great. So you can see what I've done there. Because now we're going to add a nice little embellished row around here of more Charlottes. And I'm going to be picking them up 3 at a time. So we're going to make little picots. So what we're going to do is hop over the little ditch and go through the next Delica straight across in this same row. Now, you might have to pop them into place. So right now you can see that's not really sitting very nicely like a picot. Sometimes you have to kind of pop them into place a little bit, just like that. And you get that beautiful little picot. And look how teeny, tiny, dainty this is. And like I said, I almost feel like I'm like micro beading or something. This is just so teeny tiny. And when you have a bunch of them, it adds the most beautiful, beautiful, delicate look. And to me, the use of Charlottes really tends to set a lot of beadwork apart from others. Again, there's that next little one there. That one went down pretty easy. I did find when I did my first earring that I probably had to assist maybe half of them in popping down into place, which is no big deal. It just takes an extra second. That one went down pretty easily. Again, this one I'm going to have to help out. by just kind of pulling it up a little bit and just encouraging that middle one to sit at its most high point. Super pretty. This is what it looks like from the back. We're sort of creating this beautiful little crown, this metallic crown of sparkly Charlottes. So I'm going to go ahead and finish going around here, and I'll see you back in a minute for what's next. All right, I am just shy of my last picot being added. Beautiful little crown look. So I wanted to show you what my thread path is going to be after I add in the last one. So I have, as you can see, the 3 on my needle for my last picot. And then my step up is going to be more like sort of like a step down, because I'm going to go down a row rather than up a row. But you can see that I'm going through the delica that I need to lock those 3 Charlottes into place. And then I'm headed down 1 delica diagonally into the next row. And I'm going to pull that through, because then I will be at the correct spot to start my next little embellishment. So that's what we have finished. Now, at any point, you can throw a needle on this tail and weave it in if it starts to get annoying. Everything here is nicely established, so if you want to get rid of that, weave it through a bit before you cut it off. Tie some little half-hitch knots along the way, at least 1 or 2, and you'll be good to go there. But this is where I am coming out of now. Okay. All right, so now we're going to be plugging in some of our Toho 11s here. And again, you can use Toho or Miyuki for this step. It doesn't matter. These ones happen to be Toho. And what I'm going to do is, just like I plugged in those groups of 3 little Charlottes, I'm going to plug in the same fashion by just skipping over that ditch and going into the next delica, 1 size 11 at a time. So let me get one in there and I can give you guys a nice close-up. Just like that. You can see it kind of from the front, in between, sort of lined up in between the 2 little picots that are on the row in front of it. And what we'll be doing off of here now, number one, is going to be a visual element to this, of course, but then also that's where we're going to be doing our sort of little flower petal looking embellishments. Those are going to be off of those 11s that we're adding on now. And what's really nice about doing it in this fashion is that we're adding in a row of beads that we're going to embellish off of, that are going to be easy to embellish off of, versus trying to dig into that delica bezel anymore, which can start to get a little tricky after a while. I've worked on some projects where I had to literally take some chain nose pliers and make a curve at the end of my needle just to dig in there and feed it through. But adding in a row of size 11s here, which is not too difficult to do, gives us another row, a new row to embellish off of, that's sitting up nicely. And so it's easy to get your needle in and out of it. And I chose to use this purpley color because it's going to complement those iris colored 3mm Swarovski bicones. Again, that's the brand new color from Swarovski for this season's innovations. It's a beautiful in-between of amethyst and light amethyst. And I think that's exactly what Swarovski needed, because sometimes in that color family, that beautiful warm purple, one was too light and one was too dark. So I think this is literally, it's like both of those colors got together and made a baby. And that baby is iris. And it is just the perfect little medium purple, very warm purple as well. So let me give you a look at what this looks like now. There you go, from the back. You can see it from the front, lined up in between those little picot groups that we added with the Charlottes. So I'm going to keep going around, and I will see you back here in a minute with that finished so I can show you our next embellishment. All right, I finished adding in those 11s there, and I just added in, let's see, that one right there. And I've gone through the delica to lock it into place. So the one right after it, right here, that is the very first one I added. And that's actually what I'm going to go through now, that 11 that I had first added when I started these embellishments. That's where you should be coming out, just like that. Now we're going to be picking up groups of beads and then going into the 11s around the circumference of our beadwork to add in our embellishments. Now we're going to be making a group of, or 5 groups of beads. You can see they make our 5 little petals here. So that order, the order of the beads, let me dump out some of my crystals here. The order of those beads are going to be 2 of our Charlottes, a bicone, a Charlotte, a bicone, a Charlotte, a bicone, and then 2 more Charlottes. So this is what we got. So 2 charlottes, 3 bicones with a charlotte in between each, and then we're ending with 2 charlottes again. Now we're going to skip over the next 2 11s, and we're going to go into the third 11 after that. I'll give you a close-up of that. There you go. So now you can see we added on our beads, we skipped over the next 2 11s and went into the third 11. And you pull your beads down. Now your petals can kind of go back towards the back of your rivoli, or you can kind of encourage them to stick towards the front. Honestly, I like them both either way. Obviously, once you pick one way, encourage them to all go that same way, but I kind of like the idea of the petals moving forward. But it does look just as nice if they're all going backwards, but encourage them all one of those ways consistently. So again, 2 charlottes, a bicone, a charlotte, a bicone, a charlotte, a bicone, and then 2 more charlottes. So it's those 3 bicones, and then you'll have that center one that's kind of popping out the most. So again, skip over the next 2 11s and go into the third one after that. Okay, making our second little petal here. You can definitely play with this amount of beads here, and you can use even more if you want. You can't really go less. It doesn't really sit quite right if you go less than this, but you can definitely play with adding different beads, different sized beads. You could add more beads. You could even add, have that middle bicone be a larger size, and that I'm sure would look really pretty. And you can make your petals flare out even more if you'd like. Okay, let's get that one added on there. Oops, I went one too soon. There we go. Okay, again, encourage them all to sit forward. And we will be going back through all of these as well. So if they're wanting to kind of some flop forward, some flop backwards, we're going to stiffen these up a little bit by going back through them. So that's also going to help them to stay how you want them to stay. Okay, and then one last one. So let's get our 2 charlottes, our bicone, our charlotte, our bicone, our charlotte, our bicone, and then 2 charlottes. Okay. And of course, double check. Make sure you got the right amount on there before you sew them into place. Now, the 11 that we're going to go into is the one at the very beginning. So it's the one that our first embellishment is coming off of. And that's what sort of makes us come full circle. And then what you can do is head right into that first embellishment, kind of whatever your needle will happen to pop through. We're going to go back through all of this. So that just kind of starts you off. And you can see we have our beautiful little flower. I think the white opal, the light gray delight in the center is really, really stunning. Now I'm going to follow the thread path of all of the beads that I've just added. And as long as you're using a size 12 needle, you are going to have no problem going back through all of these charlottes all over again. And like I said, this is going to really help stiffen up our little petals here. And that way we make sure that they're not too flippy floppy on your earrings, because I find that when there's not a lot of elements to something, you want to make sure each one of them is looking perfect and sitting exactly how you want it to sit. As you can see, this part is really fast. Just kind of go through whatever your needle kind of happens to pop through. Don't fight too much trying to get it to go through a whole bunch at once. You'll spend more time trying to fight with that to get it to go through a whole bunch at once, that it would have been faster just to have pulled through a shorter section and then gone through another shorter section. I think sometimes we look for, if you're not sure, you can certainly go one further if you'd like. But what you do want to do is end, actually I'll go one further. You do want to end coming out of one of the 11s. That's in between the 2 petals. So I went one too far. Because those 11s that are sitting in between our petals, we're going to pick one of them, and that's where we're going to do an adorable little beaded loop and Then we'll be able to attach our ear wire and we will be all done. So I'm heading down right into one of those 11s now. Just so you can see where I'm coming out of. Just like that. Okay, and actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut away for just a minute while I get rid of this tail. I'll be back in a minute to show you finally finishing up. All right, so I got rid of my other tail there, and I'm coming out of that 11 right at the base in between two of my petals. And I'm going to pick up some of my Charlottes and some of my Miyuki 11s here. Let's see, I'm going to pick up a total of 9 beads. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And this is going to form our little beaded loop. Now, we're not just going to be stringing these on and creating a beaded loop. We're going to go back through them in a way that's going to make our beaded loop look a little bit more interesting. I am not the biggest fan of wire guards. I think sometimes they can look a little distracting depending on how they're used. I think you have to use them a bit carefully, depending on the design. In this case, I think using a beaded loop that looks very neat and clean and has just a little bit of a pizzazz to it is going to be a much better fit and is going to be camouflaged much nicer into our design than using something large in metal. So now that I've gone back through that 11 and I've technically created a loop, I theoretically could stop here. I could go back through that loop again, reinforce it, weave up my thread. But what I'm going to do when I go back and I reinforce it is I'm going to do something a little bit different in that I'm going to skip over those top 3 of our 15s. I'm sorry, our 15 Charlottes. So I've come out of the 11 that I looped back through. I'm going to go up through the Charlotte and up through the first Miyuki 15. Then I'm going to go through the next Miyuki 15, which means I'm going to skip over the Charlotte that's there. Okay. Don't worry about if it doesn't look super tight right now. Now I'm going to go through the next Miyuki 15 and I'm going to skip over that next Charlotte. Just ignore that it's even there. Like I said, if it's a little loose, that's totally fine. It's going to tighten up in a minute. I'm going to skip over that next Charlotte and then go through the Miyuki 15 and the Charlotte after it. Now the part that's going to tighten this all up is you're going to pass through that 11 at the base of this loop again. And when we pull this nice and tight, we're going to get a cute little beaded loop that pops those little Charlottes right out of the loop a little bit. See how the Charlottes kind of like the very top center bead and then the 2 Charlottes on either side, they kind of pop out of the loop a little bit. This just adds a little bit of extra interest to a beaded loop. I didn't have to do that. I could have passed through all of them over again, and that's completely fine. But I think even the little bit of interest you can add to something like a beaded loop just makes things a little bit more interesting. So that's what I like to do with my beaded loops. So I've gone through that loop twice. At this point now, I can start to weave out my thread. And I find that that's most easily done working towards the back here and weaving out your thread around this area here. And you're going to want to tie some half-hitch knots along the way. Let's see, sometimes you can get through more than one bead at a time if you're lucky. I'm going to work my way down diagonally just a little bit. There we go. Okay, so now coming out down there. I'm going to go through this 15, the Miyuki 15. I'm just going to dig my thread underneath the threads that are passing through that Miyuki 15 already. Let's see if I can get in there. It's a little tight. There we go. So right now I'm not passing through a bead. I'm passing through the threads that are in between the beads that I'm coming out of. You pull almost all the way through. You get this little loop. You go through your loop. You have just tied a half-hitch knot. I'm going to go through some more beads, and we're going to just keep doing that. I want to tie about 3 knots before I cut my thread off, and I'm going to then weave as well a little bit after that last knot before I cut it off. So I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to do a few more knots, and I'll come back in here in a minute to show you adding on our ear wire and our beautiful finished project. All right, so cute little earring is done. We're going to go ahead and go to our ear wire. Use your chain nose pliers. If you're not familiar, they are smooth inside and they taper to a point. And we're going to swivel that little loop open just a little bit to the side. We're going to put it through that little adorable beaded loop we made and swivel that loop back shut. And now we have this adorable pair of earrings. I'm calling the Anastasia earrings. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So if you head on over to EurekaCrystalBeads.com, you're going to find that we have an enormous selection of rivolis. These are 12 millimeters again, and an enormous selection of beautiful bicones. You're going to, at the time that this video goes up, you're going to see that we have all those wonderful Charlottes, and of course all those Delicas and Miyuki 15s as well. So you can make so many color combinations with this really great one evening earring. Again, a couple hours, you're going to be done. And yeah, we'll also link you right below in the description box of the video. We're going to link you to everything that I used here as far as my exact colors. So if you want to copy this exact one, we'll certainly make it nice and easy for you. And yeah, thanks for watching. Make sure to visit us on over at EurekaCrystalBeads.com, and hopefully we can satisfy all of your beading and jewelry needs. Bye.